Roads to Liberty presents The Guardians of Liberty with your hosts, Nathan Barada and Zach Taylor.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We are the Guardians of Liberty. Sorry for our week off last week, but we are back and we're better than ever. I am Nathan Barada, your host, along with my co-host, Zach Taylor. How you doing, Zach?
I can't even right now. My ability to even can't.
Why can't you even right now, Zach?
It's just been a long week at work.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, it's been a long week for a lot of people. But hey, it's fall now. The leaves are changing colors. Nebraska's a week closer to firing its head coach, which is, I guess, a good thing now.
And we hired a moose to be our athletic director. Did I hear that right? Like a literal moose is going to be our athletic director? Is that
a literal moose? He is a literal moose roaming around at UNL right now, and he's going to be in charge of hiring our next football coach.
So does that mean...
It's kind of crazy.
Does that mean he was a minority hire?
I don't think there's many mooses. I don't think there's many of those that are athletic directors, so...
Well, for one, applaud the University of Nebraska for finally not hiring a white guy. A moose is a much better choice.
Exactly. You know, I mean, how progressive of them to shake off that human privilege and hire one of these oppressed animal minorities. That sounds good, doesn't it? I didn't mean it that way.
You remember that conversation we had a couple weeks ago about how great it would be to have sponsors? This is why we won't have any. They're going to look at this conversation and be like, no, not even a little bit.
No, I, for one, welcome our new moose overlords. I think they will be amazing. We should have elected a moose as president.
Could not have been worse than what we have.
No, it couldn't possibly be. You know, at least a moose couldn't do anything. Everybody, it's almost Halloween. You know, everyone's looking forward to trick-or-treating. Me and the wife are doing our annual horror movie, marathon. We started with her movies, which was awful. We watched Annabelle, The Beginning, something. So that was awful. And then we went to one of my horrible movies, and we watched Day of the Dead, which is a guilty pleasure of mine. Always loved it.
We watched Zombieland, and that was actually kind of good.
That's a great movie. I love Zombieland. Everything about it is amazing. Even the fact that Bill Murray is in it for 5 seconds is pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's what me and my wife do every Halloween. We watch horror movies for the month of October. I mean, we watched the entire Saw series one October, and that was awful. But we survived that. Apparently, you're not a big fan of horror movies.
Not particularly, no.
You jerk. Horror movies are amazing.
Yeah. Well, whatever.
Well, anyway... We're here to talk to you about the debt ceiling being raised by the Republican Party a few weeks ago. Now, I know it's a little bit of old news now, but we wanted to have a general conversation about what this means and what the Republican Party represents now, that they're in charge of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and still feel the need to raise the debt ceiling anyway. So what I wanted to get into here was that the Republican Party likes to bill itself as the party of fiscal responsibility. They like to pretend that they're the ones that you need to elect in order to get our fiscal house in order. You want a balanced budget? Elect Republicans. You want the deficit to go down? Elect Republicans. But time and time again, Republicans prove that they are not the party of fiscal responsibility. They proved this back in the George Bush years when the deficit and the debt rose more than any other time in American history. And yet, people thought that electing Republicans again to the halls of Congress and to the White House would somehow change things, that we'd all of a sudden fix our fiscal house and return to fiscal sanity, but that has not happened. Instead, what the Republican Party has decided to do is raise the debt ceiling once again, and what this really proves is that the Republican Party has no intention whatsoever in and seriously cutting spending. You know, and they've proven this time and time again. Whenever the Republicans propose any kind of spending, it's always this really kind of, it's not serious. In order to get the fiscal house in order, trillions and trillions of dollars need to be cut from the federal budget. And the Republican Party does not want to do that. What the Republican Party is today is a progressive light party and not a truly fiscally conservative party. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the United States is adding billions and billions of dollars to the debt every single year. And what does that mean? People like to throw around these numbers, and nobody has any conception of what the deficit actually does. And the way I like to describe it is every single dollar spent by the federal government has to be taxed from the citizens one way or the other. Now, there's several ways they can do it, but the least politically viable way to do that is an actual direct tax. Mm-hmm. That means they just raise the amount of money that you and I have to pay, to the government. Now,
those are never popular, by the way, so they don't do it.
Never. Yeah, those are never popular. And when they do increase taxes, it's always these, we're going to raise them on millionaires and billionaires. But it always ends up as a tax hike for everybody. Even Bernie Sanders wants to increase payroll taxes on the middle class. Something he didn't like to highlight a lot. I mean, that's the most direct way to pay taxes. And quite frankly, it's probably the most honest way to do it, too. Because the other two ways are very sneaky and underhanded. Now, the second way they like to do it is by borrowing. Now, this is the way our government does it. They borrow money from foreign governments. They borrow money from the Federal Reserve. They borrow money from, just bondholders like you and I. But what is debt for the federal government? Debt is simply a tax that has to be paid by future generations. This is what it means. What you are saying when you increase the debt in order to pay for our wealth today is you're spending our children's and our grandchildren's wealth at this moment. You're taking the wealth that our children, our grandchildren are going to have to work hard to earn, and you're spending it on yourselves. That is
which
what
is
debt
highly
is.
Immoral. Like when we talk about taxation being theft, this is an even more blatant form of theft because you are not being taxed in order to have things given to you. People who aren't even born yet are being taxed. So it is the epitome of immorality in government.
And it's incredibly selfish on the parts of people who are looking for more social programs or higher military spending or whatever the case may be today. Because these are things that future generations aren't going to be able to have because they'll be paying for what you and I had money spent on. They'll be paying for our Social Security. They'll be paying for our Medicare. They'll be paying for our military blunders.
Oh, we won't see Social Security. That's a pipe dream. It will not be around when we're old enough to claim it.
No, most likely it won't be. And people have been saying that for decades, but I mean, I think it's in 2024 that Social Security is going to start bringing in less than it, sends out.
Yeah. I mean, so unless the obesity epidemic just starts offing people, really, and I know I'm speaking about this in really insensitive ways, but I'm a fat kid, so I can.
Fat shaming.
I'm fat shaming myself. There's really no modern medicine is keeping people alive too long. This idea that you're going to retire at 67, get real. Not going to happen.
Yeah, if you're living to, 100 years old, that just means you're going to have to work longer in order to support yourself later into life. And that's just a fact of how things are. And it's incredibly wrong, I think, for older generations and retiring generations to continue to push for more and more social programs that put this country more into debt that younger people are going to have to pay. Because you're right. It's people who aren't even born yet that are going to have to pay the highest price. Even young children today. I mean, go to an elementary school and look around. Those are the people whose wealth you're stealing in order to pay for the debts we have today. How does that make you? That makes me feel awful to know that they're going to have to be paying with their sweat and their blood and to create wealth that's going to be put into paying off our debts. It sickens me. It's absolutely horrible.
And so we have, how do I want to say this? All right, here's where I lose a bunch of people. Baby boomers, you screwed us. And I'm not saying individually, because if you're listening to us, probably not. The generation wanted all the things that the previous generation had worked very hard for without putting in the effort. So they achieved that at the ballot box at the cost of every subsequent generation having to pick up the bill. So when we're told that, well, millennials are just lazy and entitled and blah, 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 sometimes that's true. I have worked my butt off coming from the bottom, literally, to hopefully being able to buy my first house at 32. So I have zero sympathy for listening to baby boomers complain about the Medicare or the Social Security age getting bumped up so they can't retire as early as they wanted to. Your social programs have screwed our country.
Yeah, 'cause there's no way that this country can ever pay this debt off. It's not even possible. I mean, if interest rates go up by even a little bit, we'll be paying 20% of the federal budget just on the debt. You know, right now we have interest rates that are like 1% or lower. If that goes up even a little bit, imagine how much we're going to be paying on that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, when people talk about the millennial generation, I think they're just in a lot of ways trying to emulate the high living that the baby boomer generation had. Because you're right, the baby boomer generation had a lot spent on them. They spent a lot of money on themselves. You know, they built up a lot of wealth through government programs. And that cannot last forever. But a lot of millennials, especially Bernie Sanders supporters, are trying to make that go forever, which is just going to bring about the end of this whole fiasco that much sooner.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's one of those things where this cannot last. No government can continue adding $1 trillion to its debt every year and expect to remain fiscal solvent. At some point in time, there's going to be so much debt that we're not going to be able to pay the interest on it. And who's going to lend us money at that point? You know, who's going to lend us money if we can't pay it back? If there's so much debt that we just can't afford it? And if no one's willing to lend us money, then all this spending that we're doing is going to come to an abrupt halt. And then what? You know, all these people talking about free college, free health care, free this, free that. I don't think they're at all prepared to answer those kind of questions. What happens when we can't pay our debts? What happens when no one lends us any money? Well, all this stuff that you're talking about, Social Security, goes away. Medicare, Medicaid, go away. This empire that conservatives love so much, it goes away instantly. And what we're left with is a broken, financially insolvent country that almost has to break up so that it doesn't have to pay off this debt anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the only other option is the third way, that government taxes us, and that's through inflation. Now, this is this is probably the worst way.
That's a tax on the poor.
Yeah, and inflation is a tax on the poor. This is probably why I don't know if it's worse than borrowing, but it's certainly close if it's not. Because, yeah, what is inflation? Inflation is an increase in the money supply which makes prices higher, and devalues money. It's when the government prints a bunch of money or introduces a bunch of new currency to the economy. This causes prices to skyrocket. Now, what this essentially does is it's essentially a tax, because what it's doing is taking purchasing power out of the hands of people who already have money, and it's putting purchasing power in the hands of government. Because government is the first people to get these new dollars.
Yep.
They're the first people to get financing. So knowing that the only three ways for the government to raise money is by taxing, borrowing, and inflation, the Republican Party, along with their Democratic counterparts, every single year seem to bring up that we need to raise the debt ceiling, that we need to raise the amount of money this government is allowed to owe to foreign governments, to the Federal Reserve, to private citizens. And they always try to pass this off as the responsible thing to do, which is pretty absurd when you get right down to it. I mean, if I were to tell you that I'm $100,000 in debt, if I were to tell you this and say, but don't worry, I'm going to borrow another $1,000 in order to pay off my old debts, what would you say to me? What would your response be to that? You'd say I'm crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You can't pay off debt by creating more debt. You're putting yourself in a hole that is impossible to dig out of. But that is essentially the logic of the federal government whenever they talk about raising the debt ceiling. Like, oh, we need to pay our bills. We need to be the responsible ones. Like, no, you're not being responsible. You're being quite the opposite. When you say that we need to pay our bills, no, you're creating more bills. You're creating more debt in order to pay off old debt. This is literally what a Ponzi scheme is.
Mm-hmm.
But what else can you come to expect from our government? By the time all this falls apart, by the time this house of cards comes tumbling down, the politicians that we have in office right now aren't going to be there anymore. You think they're going to take any sort of responsibility for this? You think they're going to be blamed for the inevitable fiscal doomsday that this country is heading towards? But if say Bernie Sanders becomes president and gets his way, he's going to be long gone by the time the consequences of his spending craziness actually come to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to be blamed for it. George Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, they're not going to be blamed for this. So what do they care? What do they care if, some politicians 20 years down the line have to deal with their fiscal irresponsibility? Yeah. And the Republicans make a big deal about knowing this, but they never take any steps in the right direction.
So the problem is, and this is why this is a practical reason why we always advocate for smaller government, because necessarily this is what big government is going to do. In order to combat the problem of kicking the can down the road, we need to have a government so small that the can doesn't matter. Because it is human nature to do what they're doing. You really can't even blame them. They're trying to get reelected.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense given their motivations and given their incentives to do exactly what it is they're doing. No one ever got elected by taking away welfare programs.
Mm-hmm.
No one ever lost an election because he increased the amount of money being given out to people.
Mm-hmm.
But they will lose their election by doing the opposite. But the problem with that is, once you get down that slippery slope, it just keeps building and building and building until, it's unsustainable, and then it all comes crumbling down, which at some point, inevitably, it will.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's the real consequence of not raising the debt ceiling? Because, people always talk about, we have to do it, we have to do it, we have to do it. What's the real consequence? Well, what happens if we can't borrow any more money? We stop borrowing money. That's really the easiest way to understand. If you want to balance the budget right away, refuse to raise the debt ceiling. That ties the government's hands to the point where they can no longer borrow anything, which means that the deficit does not go up. Good. Mm-hmm. This is exactly what we want. We want the government's hands to be tied. We want them to be incapable of borrowing more money, and so be incapable of spending more money. This is what we want. And if it takes a government shutdown to get it, so be it. Mm-hmm. I am so sick and tired of Republicans who talk about a balanced budget amendment, which they know will never happen, when they have the means of balancing the budget sitting right on their desk every single year. But every single year they refuse to take action and instead just kick that can down the road some more and just raise the debt ceiling again and again and again, when they really should take a stand on this issue and refuse to raise it. That's what they should do.
Mm-hmm. Only if they have principles. And no one's been accusing a whole lot of Republicans of having principles lately.
No, and it's such a frustrating thing to see the left go after someone like Paul Ryan for minuscule budget cuts. He'll propose the most minuscule cuts, and then the left will pretend that we're headed towards anarchy.
Yeah. The thing is, it's typically not even a cut; it's just a smaller raise than they want.
Yeah, like the automatic raise for X department is going to be $1 billion, and he wants to cut that by a couple million. All of a sudden, it's the end of the world. Oh, he's abolishing this department.
Hey, so breaking news coming from Newswatch 7. The Senate has passed a $4 trillion budget blueprint.
A 4 what?
Trillion.
Oh, well, that's just great. The Senate, huh?
Yep.
What party is in control of the Senate right now?
The same one that has the House and the White House, I think.
Oh, my goodness. So you're telling me they're not fiscally responsible at all?
Mm-hmm. It was a 51-49, so that means a Republican didn't vote for it. So there's a very short list. Yep. Guess which one didn't vote for it?
Was it Rand Paul?
Of course.
Oh, my
Rand,
goodness.
you're in the wrong party, bud.
He really needs to come over. I am. They don't appreciate.
If we want the Rand Pauls of the world to come to the Libertarian Party, we need to prove we can get someone elected. So get out there and help Senator Ebke.
Exactly, and I think this is a good segue to get into the second point that we were going to talk about today.
Definitely.
And that is volunteerism within the liberty movement.
Or not being lazy.
If you want liberty to succeed in America, you need to get off your chair. You need to get out from behind your keyboard and your computer and do work for... You don't have to work for the Libertarian Party. That's fine if you don't want to. But the liberty movement in general needs people. It needs dedicated individuals to get out there and spread the message of liberty.
So I'm going to disagree with that for a second. There is not another liberty movement. Okay, the Republicans do not have a liberty movement. They have libertarians who are thinking they're going to change the system, and they're not. Senator Ebke found that out. Eventually, Rand Paul is going to find that out. You cannot fix that machine from the inside. If it was possible, great people have tried and failed. One of them would have been successful.
Oh, I wasn't talking about that. I meant, non-political libertarian entities.
Oh, like Reason
or one of these libertarian institutes like Cato and Mises.
The Roads to Freedom Foundation with the Unconvention coming up here in La Vista.
Something like that. But the point being that it's not just the Libertarian Party isn't the only liberty organization in the country that you can do work for. To me, working for the Libertarian Party would be great. But if you don't want to, there's plenty of other organizations that you can get involved with.
Find a get them elected.
Yeah, find a candidate.
We have we're gonna hit this like every time. We have the most important race period, in Nebraska. I put out a call for volunteers a couple days ago. I had 2 responses, and they'd already signed up.
Yeah.
So we're getting a lot of likes on Facebook. We're getting a lot of social media momentum, and it's not translating. That tells me that we have people who are trying to ride coattails and not do the work that's necessary. We're too small of a movement for that. And so here's the other part of that. I am incredibly socially awkward and anxious. So I'm not going to go do lit drops. I'm definitely not going door to door, because I would be a blithering wreck by the third house. And that would be harmful to Senator Ebke's campaign. So what I've done is skipped a meal here and there and donated that money to her campaign. And by now I'm getting pretty close to like 100, which isn't a lot. But if other people did that, if all the other registered libertarians in this state gave $100, she would crush her opponent.
She absolutely would.
It wouldn't even be close, because she's the incumbent. She has a proven record of standing up for, so we don't like to say conservative, but being conservative now means being libertarian, because the Republican Party is so far away from conservative principles that we are the closest thing to what conservatism stands for. So if there's no reason she should not win this race, other than TD Ameritrade, the Chicago Cubs, all that Ricketts money.
I remember at the state convention last year, seeing Michael Pickens came to Washington, and he made this point that really stuck out to me when he said, the Libertarian Party is you. You are the party. There isn't. The Libertarian Party can only succeed, and the Libertarian movement can only move forward if people are willing to do the work for it.
Yep.
It's what inspired me to become the volunteer coordinator. What convinced me that I had to take an active role in, I remember coming to Libertarian Party meetings early on and saying, you guys should have been at this event, or you guys should have been at that event. And then I realized, you know what? I can just set it up, and people will come and help me. And then instead of complaining about the LP not doing this or not doing that, I can actually do that stuff myself. I can actually step up and do the work that I keep saying other people should do, and do it myself. Take that initiative, do my part to make this movement and this party a success. And that's what we really need. It's easy to be an internet troll, and trust me, I love being an internet troll as much as anybody else.
Yes, if you could see Nathan's Facebook, it is the trolliest.
I can't. I love trolling. It is fun to trigger leftists, but that's not all I do. My entire role in this movement is not just to troll leftist Facebook pages. I organize volunteers for this party. I do this podcast. I get out to every volunteer event that I possibly can.
Yeah, you've been at a lot more events than I have. And, and the thing is, so my job description is almost professional troll, because social media is what I do. But that's not the extent of my activism. Even with all the anxiety and depression and things that I have to fight through every day, I still make it out to some of these parades. I still find ways to donate money. I do booth work when I can get there. I'm a wreck, guys. I can barely form a sentence here. Imagine me out in public, but you know what? I do it. And then I go home and sit in bed and rock back and forth a little bit because it took everything out of me. But that's what it takes to win. You don't win by giving a little bit of effort. A little bit of effort gets you in the game to get your butt kicked. You have to be willing to sacrifice things. And the rewards of those sacrifices are tangible. Senator Ebke is big in the licensing reform discussions that are happening right now. Those are vital to our economy. If you want your quality of life to increase, even if you are not in a profession that is something you have to worry about, it hurts our economy when people cannot be entrepreneurs. If you want success, business success in your life, other people need to be successful as well. That is how free market economics work. So if you want to see victory, it is time to put in the work and to do things you're not comfortable with and to give up a coffee or a double cheeseburger or whatever every now and again to get some candidates elected and keep the ball moving. We are making awesome progress. But we're going to hit a wall soon with the people we've got if some of the other people that have been hanging around the movement but not working and not donating and not putting in the effort, if those people don't get involved, the people we have will burn out and the movement will go away.
That's always been the problem with the Libertarian Party. It's always that you've got this core of dedicated individuals that put in all the effort and put in all the work. And at some point in time, they get tired of it. And I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that you don't have to do a lot to make a big difference.
Right.
You know, this movement, it doesn't take a lot of effort to do a lot of good in the libertarian movement. You know, it doesn't take a lot of money to go a long way here. I mean, the Libertarian Party has been very good at being frugal since its inception. It's had to be. Mm-hmm. You know, the money that we do get goes towards very important work. It goes to very good uses. It's not wasted. You know, that's what I'm trying to say.
No one's getting paid for the stuff we're doing.
No, nobody
Not even
is.
At national, there's a handful of employees at the national level, and those are very new positions. Our chair isn't paid. He owns a business. That's how he's able to do this. Our vice chair, as much as Nathan and I may profess our extreme dislike of him, he pays his own way.
Yeah, and so do all the members of the LNC.
Mm-hmm. They fly to meetings to work in the movement on their own dime. And, you know, I'm going to shout out David Pratt Demarest. Not only does he do that, but he's building the Roads to Liberty Foundation. I'm sorry, Roads to Freedom. Jeez. Oh, I'm getting my Roads to Liberty and all that crossed here. So give me a second to talk about this because this is important. The Roads to Freedom Foundation is putting together like unpartisan conventions to get people who are on the fringes of our movement, but they're independents or Democrats or Republicans, and getting them in so that we can reach out and grow liberty across party lines. And this is something that man is doing with his own connections, his own money. So with his resources, he's building an organization to take the fight to, I mean, we joke about status, but that's what we're doing. So if he can do that, and he's one guy, he's got a couple volunteers helping him now. I'm full disclosure part of that. What are you doing? Like, I work at kind of not a dead-end job, but certainly a low low on the totem pole job at a bank. And Nathan's not doing glamorous work either. We're here doing a podcast. We do social media. He does volunteer stuff. I'm starting to do a lot more publicity stuff and press releases. And these are all things that eat into what little time we have. And I'm going to have to sacrifice sleep tonight, and I'm sure you are too, because we haven't had our family time yet. We've been at work. These are the sacrifices we make to do this. And that's not saying that we're better than anyone else, because I'm not. I suck at this. But if I don't do it, no one else is going to.
And that's the lesson a lot of people have to learn, that every time you want to see the Libertarian Party take place in this event or that event, a lot of times we've thought about that, you know, but there's only so many people in the party. There's only so many dollars to go around. Like, I remember last year I went to the Sarpy County Fair, and I saw the Republicans there, and I saw the Democrats there, and I thought, gee whiz, wouldn't it be great if right in between those two booths was a Libertarian Party booth? And wouldn't it be great if there was a big old banner and a political quiz, and there were pamphlets and a raffle, and there were volunteers in Libertarian Party t-shirts and smiles on their faces. And I thought, you know what, that would be great to have. And that was a reality this year. This year, we had a booth at the Sarpy County Fair, and it was right between the Republicans and the Democrats, and it had all that stuff I just described. It was an amazing thing to have. But you know what? It takes people with initiative to say, you know what, this is an event I want to do. This is something that I think is important. And if the people in the working in the LP right now don't have the time or resources to try to make this a reality, you know what? Maybe I can help make that happen. Maybe I can set this up, put out a call for volunteers, and get people to show up and help me. And it's not very hard to do this. I found this out very easily last year when I helped organize our booth at Papillion Days. You know, all it took was really figuring out when it was, what was required, and people got excited about it and made it a reality.
Yeah, anytime I asked the party, like, hey, what is it, I think we should do this thing. This would be a really good idea. The answer is always, you're right. How are you going to make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, because like you said earlier, no one here is paid to do this job. We're all doing it on our own time because we want this party and this movement to be successful. So most likely, if you're saying, hey, what about this? Somebody has already thought about it, but didn't have the time or the resources to make it a reality. That's a sad and sorry fact of it, is that we do not have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in this state. You know, we don't have a lot of big name donors that we can rely upon. It's just us. And we need to make this work.
I mean, we certainly don't agree with him, but Bernie showed us that this is possible.
No, it's definitely possible. We have our opportunities. This party is the only growing political party in the state right now. Mm-hmm. It's the only one getting bigger. While the Republicans and Democrats are both shrinking, the Libertarian Party is getting bigger. And it's not getting bigger by, the thousands every month. It's 100 here, it's 200 there. But just the very fact that we're growing and everyone else is shrinking, that says something to me. That says that Nebraska can be a stronghold for liberty going forward. And all the work that we're putting into this, all the time and effort, it's starting to pay off. And that culminates next year when Laura Epke gets reelected to the unicameral. That's the moment the LP really becomes a force in this state.
So, kind of the opposite of what we're doing, trying to get every little person to give up a little bit so that we can see some victories, we have George Soros, who's donating $18 billion to a nonprofit that basically supports Democrats. Several organizations have been tied to his organization, and then it's basically follow the money, and you eventually get down to Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and not the good parts of people who genuinely care about police brutality, but the parts that riot, the ones that light trash cans on fire to fight the man or whatever stupid thing they're trying to do. He pays agitators to start riots. This has been well documented. The media won't cover it. Most of the alternative media can't even cover it, because the minute you start talking about this on YouTube, your ads go away. But we don't get paid, so we're going to talk about this a little bit. This is what we're up against. $18 billion. Here in Nebraska, it's not a Democrat, it's a Republican. We have Pete Ricketts dumping millions of dollars into buying the legislature, and that's our opponent when it comes to getting Senator Ebke reelected, because the guy that they're running is not special. He's not very intelligent. He's not well-spoken. He doesn't have an original thought at all. But he's got Ricketts money. And that's what we're up against.
And it really shows you the lie that Democrats hate politics, hate money in politics. It really reveals them for the hypocrites that they are. When, they like to talk about the Koch brothers all day. Koch brothers this, Koch brothers that, the NRA this, the NRA that, but completely ignore the fact that George Soros does the exact same thing that they hate the Kochs for, namely buying politicians, buying Senate and House races, using, big money in order to influence elections. I mean, the Democrats are as guilty of this as anybody, and yet for some reason,
if you look at Republicans, you can always see where the money's coming from. It'll be banks that are typically supporting both candidates because they want to cover their bases. It'll be the NRA. It'll be big donors like the Mercers. Democrats like to get sneaky with it. And if you follow the money, you start seeing things like Saudi Arabia, Russia, for all their Russia aided Trump. No, when you look at the story, what really happened is Russia tried to destabilize the country. And they succeeded. Money well spent.
Essentially, and it's funny because I hear people accuse libertarians of taking big business money or whatnot.
Oh, I wish.
Oh, my goodness, that'd be great. But it's nowhere near true. Meanwhile, the party that they support, the Democrats, I mean, they get all this money from Wall Street. They get all this money from big business. They get all this money from rich billionaires. Somehow that's okay.
Yeah, if you're a big business and you want to support us, email me at roads to freedom publicity @gmail.com, and I will take your money. I'm going to cut that out.
But they're not...
No, I'm not going to cut that out. Screw it. It's a valid email address.
They're not going to give you anything. The Libertarian Party is never going to get anything from big businesses, because what big businesses want more than anything else is for the market to be rigged in their favor. They don't want a free market.
Regulations kill small business, not big business.
Exactly. Every time you pass a new regulation, creating a new mandate, that just makes it harder for new businesses to come up and replace the ones that already exist. That's good for existing big businesses. That's bad for small businesses.
So here's the thing. Everyone likes to jump on the net neutrality thing. And conceptually, libertarians are for net neutrality. The reason we stand against the government regulating net neutrality is you have to look at who supports it. A bunch of big businesses that can use the regulations that would be in place to strangle competition. Facebook, YouTube, They're trying to pass all this stuff that's going to make it harder for Gab, for Minds, for these up-and-coming platforms to compete with them. It is actually not immoral to tell Netflix, hey, you're sucking a lot of our bandwidth. If you want that to continue, you need to pay a little more. Because all these other sites that are not sucking our bandwidth nearly as bad shouldn't have to have their ability to get high speeds throttled because you are eating up too much of our bandwidth.
Yeah, but then people will just misconstrue the libertarian position to be, oh, you're for the big business. You're a free market economy, guys. That means you're just corporatists. You're shills for big business. And this is what really gets me a lot of times about what liberals do. They always have to misrepresent what libertarianism is and what it isn't. And I think this is a good time to bring up an LA Times article that was
idiot.
Yeah, it was written not too long ago by an individual who thought it appropriate to go after Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged without ever having actually read it. And I know this
comparing us to Republicans as though we're interchangeable.
Exactly. Writer David Horsey wrote this in his opening paragraphs for an LA Times article. All right, and we'll link this in the show notes for today. Here's how it begins. Who is John Galt? This is the mystery that drives Ayn Rand's turgid libertarian manifesto, Atlas Shrugged. And it is the spirit of John Galt that drives the modern Republican Party. What? Really? Well, I'll pass over that.
The Republicans stopped caring about entrepreneurs a long time ago.
Exactly.
Most of them. So, also, since I do this a lot, when I say Republicans, I don't mean the voters. Most Republican voters are conservatives who have principles and don't really like the politicians they're electing. It's just what they have. It's the lesser of two evils, and they've bought into that mentality. When we say Republicans and Democrats, we're talking about activists and politicians.
That's essentially it. And the article goes on. The fictional Galt is a brilliant, highly successful entrepreneur who leads a revolt of the underappreciated and overtaxed titans of industry. To pull the plug on an increasingly socialist society, Galt and his peers in the top 1% cease their own productive endeavors and bring the world economy to its knees. Now, I know you, Zach, haven't read Atlas Shrugged, but for all those out there who have, I think you will recognize immediately where the problem with this is. And it just simply proves that the writer never bothered to read the book that he's now criticizing. John Galt is not a highly successful entrepreneur. Quite the opposite. John Galt is a blue-collar worker who works in an auto factory. He's an inventor. He creates engines. He's not an entrepreneur. He's just some brilliant inventor that works for an auto plant. All right? And then excuse me for thinking that if you're going to try to write a takedown on a novel like Atlas Shrugged, or any novel for that matter, it behooves you to actually read it and know what's in it. You know, at first I was going to do a paragraph by paragraph takedown of this article, but what's the point? The entire thing is based off false premises. It's written by a guy who thinks he knows about Ayn Rand because he knows what his friends tell him about her. You know, it's written by a guy who thinks he knows what libertarianism is without bothering to talk to libertarians, to read our platform, or study anything about libertarian philosophy. It's simply a guy who assumes what we are and then writes a takedown article based on that straw man. And this is something the left does all the time. And going paragraph by paragraph to debunk the myths perpetrated in this article would be a gigantic waste of time because the writer is disingenuous to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it really bugs me.
Yeah, we were going to do this last week, and then we didn't have the show. But like we talked about this last week about how I did not want to even touch this because debunking things, like debunking bad arguments is good, but I don't feel like this dude even made an argument. Like, there wasn't even a coherent thought in this article.
No, it's basically creating a mythical straw man and attacking that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have a standing rule to never judge a libertarian based on what liberals say about them.
Yep.
It's a very good rule I've found, because I remember before knowing anything about Ayn Rand, I used to have a very negative opinion of her, simply because of the prevailing opinion within progressive culture that really gets into the mainstream and becomes, mainstream thought. And then, you know what? Something happened. I decided, you know what? I found Atlas Shrugged on Audible for $5. Thought, what the hell? I'll read it. And it was fantastic. I love Atlas Shrugged. But, I actually read it. I know what's in that book. I know who the characters are. I've seen a meme going around, right? That Atlas Shrugged is about a privileged white male who shrugged off his sense of social responsibility and decided to be selfish and blah, 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 blah. And I can always tell that the person posting that has never read it, because the main character in Atlas Shrugged is a woman, and lots of characters are actually minorities. So the whole notion that the
writer's a woman, like
yeah,
the argument doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
You would think these people would appreciate a strong, intelligent, independent woman who doesn't need a man. You think they'd appreciate that. But when it comes to Ayn Rand, no, they don't like us very much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just, for me, this is really indicative of the leftist mindset in general, because I don't think these people actually want to have a discussion. Now, we were talking about this earlier. Who does a discussion benefit? Because the left already has a near monopoly on the mainstream media.
Yep.
They already own Hollywood. They already own academia. They already own all these pillars of society where we get our information from. So
that's why their goons try to shut down conversation.
Exactly. Who does discussion benefit? It doesn't benefit them, because they already nearly have a monopoly over these institutions of propaganda.
But they have that, and then no arguments as well.
Exactly. I mean, it doesn't help them to get in an actual discussion with people they disagree with. To do that would actually hurt them, because a lot of these people, they don't have no idea what they actually believe, and when it gets exposed, it really exposes them for the absurd people that they are, and how absurd their arguments are. Now, that's why they always got to yell people down. That's why they always have to shut down speakers that they don't like. And not just alt-righters. They go after everybody they don't like. They freaking went after Ben Shapiro, calling him a neo-Nazi, even though he's Jewish. So this is not
There's
just
the yarmulke and everything.
It's not just people like Richard Spencer. It's not just people like Christopher Cantwell. It's just normal conservatives who have a different point of view, and they cannot allow a point of view that counters them to be spoken.
Mm-hmm.
They're clinging to these monopolies of propaganda as hard as they can, and they're losing their grip on that, because now, you have platforms like this, like a podcast. We may reach like a few hundred people per episode, but you know what? You also have podcasters like Ben Shapiro or Jason Stapleton or Tom Woods. You have alternate sources of media. You don't have to go to CNN and MSNBC anymore to get your news. You can get online to the Foundation for Economic Education or Cato or Mises. And it's really not undermining the left's control of propaganda. It's really undermining their ability to control what people hear. And they don't know how to deal with that. And the only way they know how to deal with that is to simply shut people down.
All right, so I think we've hit on this topic quite a bit. Let's talk about what's going on this week. Do we have anything? We have volunteer events that we don't want to blast out there. But if you're interested in doing some great work for the Libertarian Party, specifically Senator Epke, you should definitely get on that email list. What's that email, Nathan?
If you want to be on the volunteer list, you need to go to lauraepke.com. And in the upper right-hand corner, there'll be a tab for volunteers. Click on that and fill in your information, and you'll be automatically joined to her email list. Now, if you want to volunteer for the Libertarian Party, you need to go to lpne.org. And what you do there is there's going to be a tab that says Get Involved. You click on that, go down to Volunteer, and then you put in your information for that. And if you just want to help Laura Epke, then the Laura Epke website is probably the best thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to help the LP, you will also get information on Senator Epke's upcoming events.
Yep.
But you will also get emails for any LP events coming up. So that's a more general volunteer.
You should realistically do both.
Yeah, back. If you volunteer for the Senator Epke campaign, you will also get text messages from her, campaign, her volunteer coordinators. So that you're going to get more information that way, whereas I'm just relaying stuff that they give me.
Mm-hmm.
So you really should do both if that's what you're interested in doing. Because as of right now, most of the LP's activities are going towards helping Senator Epke.
Yep.
So,
do we have anything else? I think we're kind of, that's kind of all we're doing right now.
Oh, I do want to plug one event. It's not coming up till next month, but I want to get it out there early so people know about it. On November 11th, there is a Veterans Day parade in Old Town Bellevue, and the Sarpy County Libertarian Party is going to march in it. So if you want to be a part of that, visit the Sarpy County Libertarian Party Facebook page, visit the event tab, and that event is posted there. Go there.
If you are a veteran and you're tired of seeing your battle buddies going through the meat grinder of all these stupid wars, this is a way for us to legitimize the peace movement. So walk in this parade.
Exactly.
Really easy. You're walking in a parade waving in a group of people. It might be a little chilly, and it's not a lot of effort. This is a stand that you can take. This is help that you can give that's not going to cost you a whole lot.
Nope, it's just going to cost you a few hours of time and however long it takes you to drive to Bellevue. And you know what? Parades are a lot of fun.
Yeah. And then we'll probably go hang out somewhere and BS and have a good time. So
yeah, we'll have a drink afterwards. We'll hang out. You'll throw candy at the kids. Don't throw it at the kids. Throw it to the kids.
Throw it right in the face. Just bam.
Bang! Yeah, right in the forehead. Make them cry. Make their nose bleed. That's a libertarian thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, that's coming up next month, and I'm hoping to have a strong veterans presence there. That's what I'm hoping for, at least. We need to do an episode sometime in the future about foreign policy. I don't think we've talked. We've talked a little bit about that. But we need to talk about that.
We had that rant about North Korea, but there's definitely some other things that we could be talking about.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about that again in the future. Again, everybody, sorry for missing last week's episodes. We super duper professionals here at the Roads to Liberty podcast group, we deal with some technical issues every now and then, and we apologize for that. We're not quitting this podcast by any means. Well, we'll make that up. We'll make missing that up to you one way or the other. That's Scout's honor.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have anything else to talk about.
Oh, one other thing. We do have a video going up Probably I'll get done editing. That is an interview with Jake Porter, who is running for governor in Iowa as a libertarian. So look forward to that. That'll be on the LPNE Facebook page, the Minds account, the YouTube page. Yeah, so check that out.
Yep, really looking forward to seeing that. All right, well, if we don't have anything else to talk about, I guess we'll say goodbye. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is the Guardians of Liberty podcast. You have a good evening.
Have a good weekend, everyone.